Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spilling the Tea. Today we have a guest that everyone knows, unless you've only been an Overwatch League fan for about 10 minutes, and that's Jake. Hello, Jake.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Alright, so I'm just going to run through some questions, starting with some ones from Reddit. So, Murdoch LLC asks, for the talent takedown, how badly do you want to dunk on Bren and Sideshow?
I think it's gonna be fun. I think I might be like the only, at least of the people who are ex-pros, I'm like the only one who still actively plays a lot of ladder. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun for me to just play DPS and go maximum tryhard. I think people expect, oh, play Junkrat and keep it fun. No fun allowed. I'm going full tryhard mode, coming
Yeah,
for the blood.
as it should be. You've gotta make sure that you destroy them in that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, they definitely won't let you hear the end of it, so...
Oh yeah, exactly. I had to defend my honor.
Tofu Duck asks, do you think you see the game differently than other casters based on your history in the Overwatch League? Obviously being a pro player.
Yeah, I think it helps me to do the cast because I it's a lot easier for me to figure out what's gonna happen next. I feel because I'm used to doing that same job of trying to figure out what happens next. But as a player, not only are you doing all this other stuff like trying to play the game, but also you don't have a ton of information. You have to just figure it out, try to guess what ultimates they have, and you're always thinking about what they used. And I think as a caster, it feels like a lot simpler to do that same thing because you just know what all the ultimates are and where everyone's health bar is, and you see them through walls. So I think all that stuff is like, it kind of feels the same way as it did to be like an in-game leader in Overwatch, except it's just a million times easier, right? Because you have all the information at your disposal. So I actually really enjoy it, and I think it does feel like a lot of similarities to my past career. So I imagine that probably changes things for the cast, that I'm coming from that perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think it gives you, like you said, that perspective where you know what the players are sort of thinking as well. You know what the ideas that go into a lot of situations are, so you're able to sort of portray that as well in the cast, which is really nice. The Owl News asks, how do you mentally prepare for important games like playoffs when you're a player? For example, like 2018 Stage 1 playoffs.
I think for me mentally, I was always focused on like not changing anything when it comes to a playoff game. Like you shouldn't treat it differently, at least mentally. You should kind of come into every match the same way with like the same focus. And I think you'll just naturally have like a bit more adrenaline and energy for a high stakes game, just because you know that there's a little bit more pressure on. But I think if your mental preparation is like kind of the same as usual, then you'll be able to deal with that extra adrenaline. And for me, it kind of always made me play better, I feel. I guess I feel like I play better as a default, and then I'll probably make more like strange slip ups and like make mistakes I wouldn't normally make. But I think that sort of just comes with the territory, and I don't know if you can't really prevent that. I think that kind of is just the nature of a high stakes game.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me, like almost exactly the same. Just try and focus on like what you've practiced and like how like the same things that you didn't practice, and then once you have everything in your head, like obviously there's going to be that more pressure in those big games, but you know, for me I've always found like it just helps me rather than hinders me in a lot of moments. Ventville asks, was there ever a rivalry between the 2018 Outlaws and the Uprising? Because I feel like they were very similar teams and they traded wins a lot.
I always thought the rivalry stuff was like, I don't know, even for us in like the Fuel, which was like the obvious rivalry, right, of like the two Texas teams. I think that was definitely a component, but I don't know, as a player personally, I don't think I ever really felt that way, that like any match was particularly important. I think it was more like the better our opponents were, the more I wanted to win, and like the more I wanted to prove ourselves. So like to get a win against a team that is having a better season than you like feels better. And I think that for me was like always the way I thought about it as a player. Like it didn't really matter specific teams, specific players. That stuff's not as important to me as just like beating the best team you can beat, or you know, playing as well as you can against the tougher opponent. So for me, I don't know, I never really felt like, even with us in the Fuel, to be honest, like I know that was like a very hyped rivalry, but personally, my personal feeling on the subject was just like I want to just beat the best team I can beat.
Yep, absolutely. Dumb Stupid asks, what is your favorite team to cast for?
I say right now, I think it's the Shock, but I think for me it just comes down to like the teams. Like for me, it's just like more fun to watch, like the best Overwatch possible. So whatever team is currently on the top level, you know, so that was like the Paris Eternal when, you know, there was the Genji double shield meta. It was like just whoever is like kind of perfecting the current meta is the team I look forward to casting the most, which is kind of a boring answer, but I just feel like I'm most excited when I can just like hype up what a team is doing, and I have a lot of confidence that they're playing like incredibly well. And for me, it's fun to even see the little small nuances that best team does, where they don't just play the basic meta and like play it well, but they have these little plays that are like subtle but actually make a huge amount of value and doing something that's pretty unexpected. And I think that it's always like whatever the team is most comfortable with that current meta is the most fun to watch for me, because I get to highlight those little small details that make a big difference.
I feel like it's kind of the same as a player as well, because when you watch those top teams in each individual meta, you always see them doing those little things, and that's what you can learn from really as well. Like, you know, you watch that player or in your role do that thing, and you're like, wow, I can pick up so many little things from this. I got a hazard ask. Do you think you could ever see yourself as an Overwatch League coach in the future?
You know, it's funny. I was actually thinking about this today. I think the reality right now is that like casting is like really fulfilling to me, and I do want to like see it through a little bit more. I think this first year has obviously been pretty strange with the whole quarantine and everything, but I really did enjoy like traveling, going to events, and casting in front of a crowd. For me, that was really fun. It kind of reminded me of, you know, playing in front of crowds, and just, you know, feeding off that energy is awesome, and being part of the show is awesome. So I do want to keep casting for some time, but I think coaching is something that also intrigues me. Just feeling like I do still feel really connected to the players, and I feel like that for me is actually what motivates me about casting right now, is I can sort of tell the stories of pro players in a way that is, I hope, like, you know, helps. I can use my experience as a pro player to kind of tell those stories faithfully, if that makes sense. And I think coaching can be like the same motivation of like wanting to help players and be close to players. But I think it's probably something that maybe I'll explore later on down the line. But casting is just such a great gig in terms of like my work-life balance, and I also really enjoy, you know, being able to still be part of the show and still be like representing the league in some games in some way. So I think it'll probably be like later on in my career, if at all, that I coach.
Yeah, makes sense. Stray Yeka asks, what do you think is the hardest part of Overwatch to explain to new viewers?
Probably when people make plays that are, you know, like really not straightforward. Like when they're doing something that is like, for instance, staggering or resetting. I think those are probably like the most complicated concepts, because they're not obvious at all, and you're doing something that is sort of antithetical to, you know, what seems like what you're supposed to do, which is normally just deal damage to the enemy and, you know, try and get kills. But in some circumstances, like if you have ultimate and the fight is lost, then you actually don't want to deal damage, and that's a bad thing. And I think that people don't understand when the reward actually flips from positive to negative for something like dealing damage. That's kind of one of those advanced concepts that honestly I don't even really try to explain too much. I just focus on other stuff, because I don't know how much value it really brings to the average viewer to like understand those small details and just sort of write it off as like, oh yeah, they're just trying to reset as fast as possible. And I think that generally makes sense to most people. But yeah, it's sort of like those very micro plays. Or another thing that's hard is probably when people do like very selfless plays where, but I think I get the most enjoyment out of that. So when somebody makes like a true selfless play where they're like just completely baiting for another teammate, and they're going to die and accomplish nothing, but their other teammate is going to come in and just get a ton, like so much value that it's worth that losing that one player for. I think those can be hard to explain because it takes a lot of time. You have to sort of explain what multiple players do, but that's also like the most rewarding thing to explain for me, is when a player makes those self-sacrificial plays or sets up for their allies in a really effective way. To me, that's difficult to explain, but also really rewarding.
Daring Hardox asks, what advice would you give players to keep calm and avoid tilting? I often get a lot of people like DM me on Twitter or Discord and ask about how I stay untilted and how I prevent myself from getting tilted too easily. And I think a common thing amongst people that message me is that they tend to look a lot at what their teammates are doing in ranked in an environment where you can't really control that. And obviously something really important, a skill, like you said, to learn that will help you a lot in the long run is just to really focus on yourself and really look at your own mistakes. And sometimes you will get those games where you play almost perfectly and you still lose the game, you know, but that's out of your control. It is ranked. Sometimes that happens and it's normal to tilt every now and then. But if you can control the amount that you tilt and you really focus on yourself, then it'll make your life a lot easier in ranked.
Yeah, I think that's like definitely the number one tip, actually, is just keep your focus on yourself, because even in the games you play almost perfect, it's still way more productive to think about the one or two things that could have been a little bit better from you than it is to worry about the 100 mistakes your teammate made. Like, because none of those 100 mistakes that your teammate made matter. Like, they just don't matter. They don't actually make you better. You didn't make those mistakes. and reflecting on them, while it sort of feels good in the moment, it doesn't really bring you forward, and it can make you just more and more tilted because, like you said, it's out of your control.
Rochanity asks, do you think Dante's Junkrat can rival that of your own?
Yeah, I actually think Dante is really good at Junkrat. I think he had an insane clip I saw that was pretty sick. Like I think Dante is like one of the most talented players I got the chance to play with in my pro career. I feel like he's got like a really bright future because he definitely can like have like a really broad hero pool. Because I think if you can play flankers, which is like his role, I think is to play all the flankers really. Then I think that's like the hardest role of all the roles in DPS. Versus like the slower projectile heroes, which he also plays, and then like the core hit scan, which I think is like the last group that he doesn't play as much. But I think Junkrat is like very much in that category of his good heroes, which is like a slower projectile hero, but also can be played as a flanker. So I actually think it suits his style really well.
Yeah, and sort of linking into that question as well, Chris Degelli also asks, who is your favorite Junkrat in now, and why?
You know, this is gonna be a weird answer, but I actually, at least back in season 1, the Junkrat the person I thought was like the best and the hardest to play against on the mirror, at least back when it was at the very beginning and not many people played it, was actually Striker. Weirdly enough, I think Striker was like one of the most annoying to play against because he was one of the first people to like really challenge me on the flanks. And like at the beginning, I think very few people were actually playing that way, like going for solo kills and just like hunting backline. But he was like one of the only other players to play that way. And to play like a similar style as me. So I always thought he was extremely good at it and his fundamentals were good. Which is funny because he almost never plays the hero now, and he's obviously insane on stuff like Tracer and Widow, which is like what you think of him as, I guess. But that's always my memory of that time, is that I remember thinking Striker was really good.
Lastly, we got a question from Captain Komodo. Do you prefer playing or casting Overwatch in the situation that you're in now? And do you have certain pros or cons to both? Something that you really miss from playing or something that you really don't miss about playing?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. I think for me right now, like I definitely feel happier, like overall, and like life satisfaction than I was last year with playing. I think the trouble with playing is that like you can do your absolute best and like put 100% of your effort in, which I feel like I really did for almost my whole career as a player. Near the end, I think I slowed down because I just wasn't as passionate anymore. But I think that was why I ultimately decided to retire. And I think I just had this, I hated that feeling of like, feeling like I did my absolute best effort and then it just didn't really matter because we still lost. I still like made a crucial mistake. Even if I had like an insane series and played really, really well, if we didn't win, then I just wouldn't be happy. And I felt like it's never fully in your control as a player. Like you do your best, but you're just, one part of the team. And I hated that feeling that it's like not in your control, the outcome of the game. Whereas as a caster, I really like that, like if I do a good job and have a good cast and I like made some cool points and highlighted some cool players and made sure that they got their story told, then I'm satisfied, I'm happy. I don't necessarily care what the outcome of the game is. Even if it's like a 3-0 or something, it's like I can still enjoy that and still like, have a good time explaining why the winning team is so good. What are they doing? And then for the losing team, like what do they try to do? Like where can they continue to build and improve? And like I enjoy that pretty much no matter what. So it feels like it's in my control. And that for me is like the biggest difference between casting and playing is it's casting. Although I do have obviously a casting partner in ZP, I do feel like it's a little bit more of like a single player game where if I do a good job, I'm happy and there's no outcome necessarily to be like worried about, which I quite like. Although I do for sure miss like. There's nothing quite like just the incredible adrenaline rush of like winning a high stakes game or something is really unique. And although casting doesn't have those high highs and low lows, the high highs were obviously amazing, and that's something I'll for sure remember. I think for my whole life, and something I'll always draw me back to esports. It's because I understand like that incredible emotional investment that goes into every single game, every single match, and that people care so much. So. That's the good and the bad, but ultimately I think I'm happier now in my current role.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's all the time we've got, so thank you very much, Jake, for coming on.
Thank you. It's been fun.